When I was promoted with tenure some years back, I was a bit deflated. Don't get me wrong. Of course, I was very happy about my promotion, and I was very happy about the many things that I had learned up to that point. And I was very happy about the progress that I had made in my career. But I was deflated because when I reflected on my work up to that point, I came to the realization that if I was completely honest with myself, I had to admit that my work had changed nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, I don't want to go so far as to say that my work had been a waste of time. I had learned a lot during my, up to that point, 12 years of research, including grad school. I had learned a lot. But I couldn't point to any significant changes that had resulted from my research. And that bothered me deeply because the whole reason I got into this line of work in the first place was because I wanted to create change. And I thought that research was one way in which to do so. So when I came to this realization, I decided that I had to change the way I do research. So what I want to share with you today is a research model. Now, this is a partnership research model, and perhaps this model isn't for everyone, but I think that for those of us who want to focus explicitly on improving the connection between research and decision-making, I think this model has a lot of promise. Now think back to how you were trained, if you're a researcher, how you were trained to do research. Many of us, myself included, were trained to begin with a development of a research question that is based on the existing research literature. So I, as a researcher, developed that question based on existing literature. However, in a partnership research model, the research questions are developed jointly with researchers and decision makers working together to produce a research question or a set of research questions, an entire research agenda. Now, what this means is that the dissemination process begins before the study begins. This means that dissemination is central to the research process, not an afterthought. Secondly, in the traditional academic research model, we are taught often as researchers to focus on short-term, project-based collaborations with schools and school districts. And sometimes, though often it's not the case, that these schools and school districts benefit from that research. Whereas in a partnership research model, we focus on a long-term collaboration, a long-term alliance that is based on solving long-standing problems. In the traditional academic research model, the research questions are often selected first, and then the research sites are selected based on those research questions. At least that's how I was taught. You focus first on developing the question, and then you select the sites accordingly. But in the partnership research model, it's actually the reverse. It is a place-based partnership, and therefore the emphasis is on the place first, and the research questions are developed according to the needs and what is relevant to that particular site. That is a very different approach. And last, but perhaps most importantly, the traditional research model focuses primarily on informing other academics. And I think that, unfortunately, that is highly insufficient, and therefore, in a partnership research model, the emphasis is on informing decision makers. Now, of course, we also think it's important to inform other academics, but the priority is to inform other decision makers in a timely manner. Now, of course, given the nature of this partnership research model, the decision makers play a very important role in facilitating this collaboration with researchers. And it is very important for decision makers, whether at state agencies or local agencies, local school districts, it is very important for these decision makers to focus on communicating regularly with researchers and letting them know what their research needs are, what their most urgent, most pressing research questions are. And it is important that these decision makers do what they can to facilitate the sharing of data, both existing data, but also facilitating the collection of new data. Of course, protocols have to be in place for dealing with sensitive data, but with those protocols in place, there's a lot that can be done to facilitate the exchange of data in a very timely manner. And of course, decision makers, this is perhaps the most challenging part, but decision makers must use that research evidence to inform their decision making. But it's very important for researchers to understand that that process is also quite messy. Just like researchers understand that research can be quite messy, the process of using evidence can also be quite messy. It is not a straightforward and direct process. Often, it is a process that is contingent upon many factors that researchers are often not aware of. It is a process that is interactive and iterative. So it's very important for researchers to have a better understanding of that process of evidence use. And of course, there's also a very important role for funders, because there's a lot that funders can do to help to support this partnership research model. A lot of funding is needed in order to train the next generation of researchers to do research within this partnership model. As I highlighted earlier, this is a very different model compared to the way many of us were trained to do research. And therefore, it is very important for us to think about how to train the next generation of researchers to do research in this manner. And funding is needed both to create new partnerships between researchers and local and state agencies, but also to develop existing partnerships. It costs money to create these infrastructures, these lines of communication between the researchers and decision makers. And last, of course, funding is needed in order to facilitate the collaboration, not only within partnerships, but also to facilitate the collaboration across partnerships, because there's a lot that we can learn from one another. Many of these partnerships are relatively new. Not all of them are new, but most of them are relatively new. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to further improve this connection between researchers and decision makers. But I believe that if more of us get involved in the work of supporting this partnership research model, I think that we can go a long way toward improving the connection between education research and education decision making, and that we can, in fact, create that change in education that we so desperately need. Thank you.